Hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Donovan from Salt of the Streets, and this is the review preview for the months of March and April. Our March book was 1984 by George Orwell, and our April book is Different Seasons by Stephen King. It's actually only two of the stories from different seasons, so don't worry about the title so much. Don't worry that you couldn't see it. Don't worry I didn't put it on there. It'll be okay, because it's really just two stories out of here. So we'll get into that a little bit later. We will start with the review portion. 1984. This book, I actually really enjoy this time. I enjoy it more and more every time that I read it. I always try and think back to the first time that I read it, which was in pre-AP in the 9th grade, freshman year of high school, and I didn't get it at all. The only thing that I really remembered from it was the rat scene, was just when he's being threatened by the rat, he's being tortured. That's the only thing that I really remembered when I went to read it again as an adult. And now I try and remember the stuff that I don't like about it. And this time around, the only thing I could remember not liking was the portion of the book where Winston is reading Goldstein's book. I found that part to be exceedingly boring. This time around, I really enjoyed it. And I'm not sure if it's... No, I think it's because, and I believe that I discussed this with Colin, I believe that I enjoyed it this time around because we are, as a country, involved in kind of more active warfare than any of the other times that I'd read this book, that we are kind of involved in what's going on in Ukraine. So to see the power structures and the different teams being drawn out, it was more reminiscent of the book, and so it was a little bit easier to relate to modern day and kind of just bring into my own life. So either way, I really enjoyed this. I think that it's a fantastic book. I think that it's worth probably a yearly read for everybody. It was a very easy read. This small copy was just under 300 pages, and I even stopped at one point during the month and finished another book. I finished another Stephen King book. So this is totally doable. I think with just... the 10 pages is nothing because they're such small pages, so I think that I'm not the only person who experienced that during this month of this book, but I think that it's worth it, a yearly read for everybody. So we will kind of get into this book, and I think maybe the best way to handle it is to be cliche about it and talk about the different ways that this book has manifested itself into modern life, and then we'll talk about some of the ways that it was a little bit different, and then we will move on. So first I want to talk about the children turning on the parents. And I have two readings for this, so I will start with one reading and then we will end with the other one. And this is from page 24. With those children, he thought, that wretched woman must lead a life of terror. Another year, 2 years, and they would be watching her night and day for symptoms of unorthodoxy. Nearly all children nowadays were horrible. What was worst of all was that by means of such organizations as the spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages, and yet this produced in them no tendency whatever to rebel against the discipline of the party. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it. The songs, the processions, the banners, the hiking, the drilling with the dummy rifles, the yelling of the slogans, the worship of Big Brother. It was all a sort of glorious game to them. All their ferocity was turned outwards against the enemies of the state, against foreigners, traitors, saboteurs, thought criminals. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children, and with good reason. For hardly a week passed in which the Times did not carry a paragraph describing how some eavesdropping little sneak, quote, child hero was the phrase generally used, had overheard some compromising remark and denounced his parents to the thought police. So, we have seen this in the past. There is historical context for this, and I think that's what makes this most chilling. At the time, I don't have all of the timelines of all the different regimes of everything, but there definitely was evidence of this at the time, right? This was written in like 1952, I think that it says. We talked about this in the review preview from last month. Go check it out. I had all the data at the time, right? This concept we've discussed many times on the show, right? It manifested itself in the past in the form of the Red Guard in China and during the Cultural Revolution, and on a larger family scale in Soviet Russia when there were whole communities and different families reporting on each other, and then of course in modern North Korea, right? North Korea, people are being turned in at any given time for any crime. It's horrific, and then the punishment goes down generations. It's really pretty tragic. We've talked about that last year when we did Yeonmi Park's book, and we talked about some of the things that they have described. We have also discussed how we see a more formation of what we've called a modern Red Guard in today in the universities, and in some cases even reaching down into the different grade schools, right? We've talked about some of the different gender ideology and the praxis of the critical race theory. Yes, thank you very much. Of different various critical theories reaching down in the form of praxis into these different grade schools and stuff like that, and the way that we're asking these children to interact with each other and recognize race and power structures and things like that at very, very young ages. It's not good, and it's corruptive. And the only point of it is to just try and gain influence, separate the children from their parents to gain influence over them. This type of stuff is really dark. We need to pay attention to it. And when people start to reference 1984 in regards to things like this, we shouldn't just discount them as crazy of like, oh, this guy's just talking about, books. This is relevant, right? And that's why it's written in this book. That's why these concepts have rung true for so long. And it's why we keep reading it. It's why it sits with us and why we can't forget it. Because this is a more palatable way for us to remember that teachers and parents were beaten to death by their children during the Cultural Revolution in China. This is a little bit easier for us to palate and still keep that concept alive inside of us, so we don't ever forget that.
And it was 1949, by the way. So that really makes sense.
So just after, right? So makes a lot of sense. And now we can go into our second reading for this particular segment. Ah, well, what I meant to say shows the right spirit, doesn't it? Mischievous little buggers they are, both of them. But talk about kinesis. All they think about is the spies and the war, of course. Do you know what that little girl of mine did last Saturday when her troop was on a hike out in Berkhamsted Way? She got 2 other girls to go with her, slipped off from the hike, and spent the whole afternoon following a strange man. They kept on his tail for 2 hours, right through the woods, and then, when they got into Ambersham, handed him over to the patrols. What did they do that for? Said Winston, somewhat taken aback. Parsons went on triumphantly. My kid made sure he was some kind of enemy agent. Might have been dropped by parachute, for instance. But here's the point, old boy. What do you think put her onto him in the first place? She spotted he was wearing a funny kind of shoes. Said she'd never seen anyone wearing shoes like that before, so the chances were he was a foreigner. Pretty smart for a nipper of 7, huh? What happened to the man? Said Winston. I couldn't say, of course, but I wouldn't be altogether surprised if... Parsons made the motion of aiming a rifle and clicked his tongue for the explosion. Good, said Seam abstractedly, without looking up from the strip of paper. Of course, we can't afford to take chances, agreed Winston dutifully. So, I mean, this is where it can go, right? And this is, maybe people can say that this is like made comical or it's satirical, but I mean, this is really the type of stuff that we're talking about. Like I said, parents and teachers were literally beaten to death by their children, by their students in the Cultural Revolution in China. That's a real thing that actually happened. You can read about it in books. You can watch movies about it. I mean, this is real. So this type of stuff can happen.
One might draw a distinction between that and, say, like what Colin Kaepernick said about his own parents lately. This is not out of the realm of possibility in today's world.
These things are happening. We have seen the separation of the parents when we talked about the gender ideology, right? When we have schools that are pressing children into conversion, also into transition, also pressing children into not telling their parents when they're transitioning, they're actively trying to create that divide, even if it didn't exist before. They're creating one. They're creating the divide so they can bond with the children and have that power, that position over the parents to insert the ideology. That's precisely why this is happening. Okay, so now I want to talk about historical revisionism, right? And I have 2 readings for this, so I will start with one reading and then we will move on. We'll talk about a little bit and then we'll move on to the other one. This is from page 36. Everything melted into mist. Sometimes, indeed, you could put your finger on a definite lie. It was not true, for example, as was claimed in the party history books, that the party had invented airplanes. He remembered airplanes since his earliest childhood. But you could prove nothing. There was never any evidence. Just once in his whole life, he had held in his hands unmistakable documentary proof of the falsification of historical fact. And on that occasion, Smith! Screamed the shrewish voice from the telescreen. 6079 Smith W. Yes, you! Bend lower, please. You could do better than that. You're not trying. Lower, please. That's better, comrade. Now stand at ease, the whole squad, and watch me. A sudden hot sweat had broken out over Winston's body. His face remained completely inscrutable. Never show dismay, never show resentment. A single flicker of the eyes could give you away. He stood watching while the instructress raised her arm above her head, and one could not only gracefully, but with remarkable neatness and efficiency, bent over and tucked the first joint of her fingers under her toes. There, comrades, that's how I want to see you doing it. Watch me again. I'm 39 and I've had 4 children. Now look. She bent over again. You see, my knees aren't bent. You can all do it if you want to, she added as she straightened herself up. Anyone under 45 is perfectly capable of touching his toes. We don't all have the privilege of fighting in the front line, but at least we can all keep fit. Remember our boys in the Malabar front, and the sailors in the floating fortress. Just think what they have to put up with. Now try again. That's better, comrade. That's much better, she added encouragingly as Winston, with violent lunge, succeeded in touching his toes with knees unbent for the first time in several years. So what Winston is talking about here when he's saying there's only one time in his life that he's held unmistakable documentary proof of falsification, this is a world in which the party has complete and total control, not only over what is happening now, but what has happened in the past, because everything is still written on paper. So the only thing that saves us from living with this as part of our existence is the internet, right? I don't know or think that Orwell at the time could have conceived of the internet. I don't think that it was really possible. It's such a revolutionary idea, but the idea at the base of the Ministry of Truth is absolutely alive, right? We saw during COVID, and because that's the easiest example of all of this, the complete control of information. Items were removed, facts were denied, they were fact-checked, they were completely scrubbed over, and they were falsely flagged as lies. Control of information is vital in the pursuit of total authoritarian control. That's the only way that this can be done. If they control all of the information all the time, that is, in my personal opinion, why governments are having such a difficult time now. The only thing, like I said, that saves us from this is the internet. We have even the website, the Wayback Machine, that you can go to and find web pages, even if they were changed. You can see how they sat on particular days in time because it's locked. That metadata is there. That is the only thing that saves us from this, because we can still find the documentation. If there is at some point a way for that to be controlled, for individual pieces of data to be completely removed from existence, that is when total authoritarian control will be possible again. But even in China, where they have the closest thing possibly that you could find to authoritarian control, people still find ways to transfer data, even if it's on little USB sticks, because that happens in North Korea, where they deny even pop culture. Still CDs and DVDs and flash drives make it into that country for people to get that information. So because you can't deny it, just like we said in all these episodes, you can't stop the signal. All right, and this is our second reading for this, second and final reading, and this is from page 58. The new ration did not start till tomorrow, and he had only 4 cigarettes left. For the moment, he had shut his ears to the remoter noises and was listening to the stuff that streamed out of the telescreen. It appeared that there had even been demonstrations to thank Big Brother for raising the chocolate ration to 20 grams a week. And only yesterday, he reflected, it had been announced that the ration was to be reduced to 20 grams a week. Was it possible that they could swallow that after only 24 hours? Yes, they swallowed it. Parsons swallowed it easily, with the stupidity of an animal. The eyeless creature at the other table swallowed it fanatically, passionately, with a furious desire to track down, denounce, and vaporize anyone who should suggest that last week the ration had been 30 grams. Syme, too, in some more complex way involving doublethink, Syme swallowed it. Was he then alone in the possession of a memory? Okay, so now I want to talk about doublethink. And this is a big concept. I have a couple of different readings for it, and we talk about this part of 1984 maybe more than any of the other ones. It is present in modern day. It happens consistently. It's difficult to watch. It's difficult to conceptualize, and it's difficult to put into words. It's the same thing as when someone asks you, what is a woman, or what is an assault rifle, or what is critical race theory? For depending on your political ideology, these are very difficult questions to answer. And so I'm going to give you probably the best thing that I could find for a definition of doublethink, and then we'll talk about some other stuff, like I said, some other readings as well. This is from page 212. The first and simplest stage in the discipline, which can be taught to even young children, is called Newspeak, Crime Stop. Crime Stop means the faculty of stopping short, as though by instinct, at the threshold of any dangerous thought. It includes the power of not grasping analogies, of failing to perceive logical errors, of misunderstanding the simplest arguments if they are inimical to ingsoc, and of being bored or repelled by any train of thought which is capable of leading in a heretical direction. Crime Stop, in short, means protective stupidity. But stupidity is not enough. On the contrary, orthodoxy in the full dense demands a control over one's own mental process as complete as that of a contortionist over his body. Oceanic society rests ultimately on the belief that Big Brother is omnipotent and the party is infallible. But since in reality Big Brother is not omnipotent and the party is not infallible, there is need for an unwearying, moment-to-moment flexibility in the treatment of facts. The key word here is black-white. Like so many newspeak words, the word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white, in contradiction of the plain facts. Applied to a party member, it means a loyal willingness to say that black is white when party discipline demands this. But it means also the ability to believe that black is white, and more, to know that black is white, and to forget that one has ever believed the contrary. This demands a continuous alteration of the past made possible by the system of thought which really embraces all the rest, and which is known in newspeak as doublethink.
One might contextualize that to 2 + 2 = 5.
2 + 2 = 5. That is an excellent example, because that's probably the newest one. That's the one we're working with right now, is that, and James Lindsay has toyed with that, in the past, but that one really is picking up steam right now, that people are finding any way to make this work. And they're saying, you're going to see this. I swear to God, if you haven't heard it already, you're going to hear it, right? And the best example is people are saying, well, that's because the world doesn't work in absolutes. And most of the time when you see it, it's going to be, or the best example that they'll give, right, is when you see the equation 2.3 plus 2.4 equals 4.7, right? Or if you round up, then it equals 5. That they're really doing this. That this is an actual thing that's happening. People are really making these arguments because they're trying to find any way to hold two different ideas at the same time, right? Today, in modern world, we just call this good old cognitive dissonance, right? You are holding two competing ideologies at the exact same time and accepting them both. That's what that means. That's what we hold it, right? So holding the two competing ideas at the same time. And I think the best and most direct example is belief in our two-party system, right? Believing that these people are evil, but these people are great, when in reality they are all part of the same uniparty, right? So many people are willing to convince themselves that there are real differences between those two parties, but we all know it's really just the uniparty. It's all it is at the end of the day, right? Those who support the war in Ukraine while denouncing the actions of the U.S. in Afghanistan, this is the same thing. This is doublethink, right? Claiming to want sovereignty and freedom and believing that the rights of others should be curtailed because you don't support them. This is doublethink. All of these things are examples that we see all the time of doublethink. This is all bad. This is all terrible. It's all inconsistency. It's all moral inconsistency that people are willing to push on other people. You've got to stop this. If you catch yourself doing it, because these are a few really prominent examples, got to stop. You need to evaluate your behavior, evaluate the roots of what you're doing. Why are you saying this? Why are you really upset? How do you really feel? And adjust your behavior. This is not good, right? And it only elicits more hypocritical behavior from other people. We've got to stop doing this type of stuff. All right, and I have 2 more readings and we will knock this out. This one is from page 35. Stand easy, barked the instructress, a little more genially. Winston sank his arms to his sides and slowly refilled his lungs with air. His mind slid away into the labyrinth world of doublethink. To know and not to know. To be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies. To hold simultaneously two opinions which canceled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them. To use logic against logic. To repudiate morality while laying claim to it. To believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy. To forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety. consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then again, once again, to become unconscious in the act of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. Ooh, ooh, this one's fire. Ooh, this one's fire. Okay, this is the best example because it aligns literally with what we were just discussing. Okay, this is from page 80. He picked up the children's history book and looked at the portrait of Big Brother, which formed its frontispiece. The hypnotic eyes gazed into his own. It was as though some huge force was pressing down upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you almost to deny the evidence of your senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make the claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense, and what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but that they might be right. For after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4? Or that the force of gravity works, or the past is unchangeable? If both the past and the external world exists only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then?
Did I just say 2 + 2 = 5?
Yes.
Oh, shit.
Yes. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about cancellation, right? This is something that is discussed in this book to the umpteenth degree. It is a more intense version, and they call it vaporization in this book, right? You become an unperson. Every existence or every scrap of evidence of your existence is completely erased. So I have one reading here that is from pages 45 and 46, and then we will talk a little bit about this, and we will keep it going. Okay, it's from page 45 at first. Winston did not know why Withers had been disgraced. Perhaps it was for corruption or incompetence. Perhaps Big Brother was merely getting rid of a too popular subordinate. Perhaps Withers or someone close to him had been suspected of heretical tendencies. Or perhaps, what was likeliest of all, the thing that had simply happened because purges and vaporizations were a necessary part of the mechanics of government. The only real clue lay in the words refs unpersons, which indicated that Withers was already dead. You could not invariably assume this to be the case when people were arrested. Sometimes they were released and allowed to remain at liberty for as much as a year or two before being executed. Very occasionally, some persons whom you had believed dead since long ago would make a ghostly reappearance at some public trial where he would implicate hundreds of others by his testimony before vanishing, this time forever. Withers, however, was already an unperson. He did not exist. He had never existed. Winston decided that it would not be enough simply to reverse the tendency of Big Brother's speech. It was better to make it deal with something totally unconnected with its original subject. Yes, so we should all feel thankful that as dark as it is, that in our world people are only socially vaporized and not physically, because in this world in 1984, they're literally being killed. They're removing you from history, they're making you embarrass yourself, denounce your friends, implicate other people, and then they're going to kill you. And thankfully, as dark, not even thankfully, that's in this world, the reality is now they just make you stand in front of everyone and apologize and beg for forgiveness, and then you're generally allowed to move on, and maybe in 10 years you can come back, or, whatever. It's different depending on your crime, and different depending on who you are, what parties you've served in the past. Louis C.K., supposedly he was never going to come back ever, and he's touring and, selling out Madison Square Garden. So, and this is the reason that people focus so much on cancelization, is because it can, under control of the wrong people, go really far. Back to you.
I was going to say, the cancelization in this book is so centered on the Soviet model,
Yes.
because that's the world he was living in at the time. It's easy to forget because of the totality of the cancelization in this book, that it's hard sometimes to transfer that into the real world. But I think you make a really good point in the fact that in today's world we do that on a social level.
Yes.
But I would imagine that if Orwell was alive in these contemporary times, he could have gone way more in depth and more kind of detailed into the aspects of vaporization, not just in the totality, the totality way of the physical form. You're just iced, you're gone. we make you disappear. But, you know, he would write a more in-depth book today because the same practices of Ingsoc in 1984 are so, it's like they found creative ways to expand on all this.
Right. Right. So the last thing that I really want to talk about is control, right? All of these different things we've discussed are different aspects of the control that the party has over people in 1984 London, right? And the control that the party has is complete, and it must be complete or you become a threat. If they don't have complete and total control, not only over your mind and your actions, but how your mind works, and if you're not completely assimilated with the hive, then you could potentially subvert the mind of somebody else, right? So I have one final reading that will kind of underline this, and this is from page 100. Yes, he thought again, he would come back. He would buy further scraps of beautiful rubbish. He would buy the engraving of St. Clement's Danes, take it out of its frame, and carry it home concealed under the jacket of his overalls. He would drag the rest of that poem out of Mr. Charrington's memory. Even the lunatic project of renting the room upstairs flashed momentarily through his mind. For perhaps 5 seconds, exultation made him careless, and he stepped out onto the pavement without so much as a preliminary glance through the window. He had even started humming to an improvised tune. Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. You owe me 3 farthings, say the... Suddenly, his heart seemed to turn to ice and his bowels to water. A figure in blue overalls was coming down the pavement not 10 meters away. It was the girl from the fiction department, the girl with the dark hair. The light was failing, but there was no difficulty in recognizing her. She looked him straight in the face and then walked quickly on as though she had not seen him. For a few seconds, Winston was too paralyzed to move. Then he turned to the right and walked heavily away, not noticing for a moment that he was going in the wrong direction. At any rate, one question was settled. There was no doubting any longer that the girl was spying on him. She must have followed him here, because it was not credible that by any pure chance she should have happened to be walking in the same evening upon the same obscure back street, kilometers distant from any quarter where party members lived. It was too great a coincidence. Whether she was really an agent of the thought police or simply an amateur spy, actuated by officiousness, hardly mattered. It was enough that she was watching him. Probably she had seen him going to the pub as well. And the reason that I picked this, right, is because the annotation that I have here, and maybe you can see it, is that the paranoia is an aspect of control, right? The fact that the woman who eventually he falls in love with, because this is Julia, right? We all know, we've read this book. This is Julia, the woman he falls in love with, he believes to be an agent of the government, because you literally cannot trust anybody. Even the woman, the wife that he was assigned, he couldn't trust her. He thought about killing her at one point in time because he couldn't trust her. That paranoia is like a closing, one of the final pieces of total control, because you can't trust anybody, and you can't even trust yourself or the decisions that you're making, the thoughts that you're thinking, because someone could find out. If you're talking in your sleep at night and they hear you, you could be arrested for things you're saying when you're unconscious. That is total control. That is the party, and this is the terrifying reality of 1984 that we all need to remember, right? Certain aspects of this book, I think, are just inherent consequences of government. This is just how this is going to be. But some more intensified parts, like the temporary creation of an actual ministry of truth, right, should scare the shit out of us, okay? There is Marxist infiltration in our universities and our political parties, which all but guarantees that it is in our government. There are members of our government now that are of that ideology. We all know how we feel about government, right? Before the time being, this is the world that we live in. This is the structure we live in, the structure of our country, of our government. I can promise you that all of our lives could get a whole lot worse. And I guarantee you that they will if we have the shift in government towards this type of control, towards this type of ideology. Our lives are going to get a whole lot worse. And Michael Malice makes this point, I think, in The White Pill and a few other of his books, is that it is bad now. If you take an objective look, we just did this in episode 145, right? Colin broke my brain in part 3 because it's dark. Some of the stuff they're talking about, the way that our countries can be impacted, is really, really rough. But if you look at how it's been in the past, where people have literally eaten their children because they're so bad off, because they can't find anything to do, because they don't know how to survive, it could get so much worse than it is now. Everything is expensive. Bills are very expensive. I can still afford to buy food, though. I still have food. There's still food for me to buy in the store, right? It gets a lot worse than this. So we shouldn't get comfortable. We shouldn't get complacent. We need to be aware that it could get worse, feel appreciative for what we have, and operate on that moving forward. So this is important. And I think, like I said earlier, this is an easier way to keep those concepts fresh in your mind, because it's difficult to forget. You can't read this and not think about the ways that it mirrors reality now, right? That's just how people's brain works. Wow, this reminds me a lot of this, and this is really interesting. The Ministry of Truth, that's a real thing that happened in our actual lifetime. Just in the last 2 years, this happened. So this is important, and it's easier than going back and reading about the Cultural Revolution once a year, because that gets extra dark. It's easier than reading Michael Malice's White Pill once a year, because that gets really, really dark, to know the realities of where human beings have gone and not just be reminded of what the potential is. Right. So I think this is a good thing. This is a great book. Everyone should read it. Your children should read it. All Americans need to read this book. We all need to have an understanding of this. Right.
Can I ask one question, good sir?
Of course.
There was one aspect of this that I noticed this time around in the audiobook that I didn't like, or maybe that's using that too lightly, but I wish Orwell had spent more time on like the everyman that's not necessarily in the party, like when he's at the pub, talking to the normies.
The proles.
The proles that are unaware necessarily, they're like peripherally aware of like, do you really believe this? And like, this isn't, what's going on here. I wish we would have spent more time with the everyman, the prole that's out in society, because everything that we focused on in this book was so party centric, because he's a party member. All the people he interacts with more or less are party members. You only get a couple, like the store owner and then the guy in the pub. And that's basically it as far as people that are not directly in the party or in that. I wish we could have gotten more time with people on the outside and how they perceive the party and stuff like that, and how it affected their lives and all that. Mind you, I'm not going to talk shit on this book. It's fantastic. This last time around, I felt myself just wanting more from those people to build a broader picture. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that take.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, because it's a completely different experience. The proletariats versus the outer party members like Winston is a totally different experience in the same city. They live outside of these party districts or whatever, but the proletariat districts, people seem to still be able to lead relatively normal lives of just in relative poverty. They have jobs, people are going places, but there aren't as many jobs because all of the standard government ones are filled by outer party members and inner party members, but there's still labor and whatnot that needs to be done. So I think that's a fair critique, quote unquote criticism. It's not, because like you said, it's not this book is bad because I don't get that, but I would like more of that.
Yeah, I just would have liked more.
I think that's a fair note. Just to hear more about that experience, to see what that would be like, I think would be very interesting. Because it doesn't, when Winston is talking to O'Brien in his house, it doesn't even seem like their lives are that different between the inner party and the outer party members. You have to be like inner party for your life to be truly different, So,
like he gets a couple perks, but other than that, like he's still got to shut the info screen or whatever that is off or whatever when he's talking.
Right.
He has the ability to shut it off, but he still has to do that.
Still has to have it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. So now let's talk about the preview, right? This gets a little bit complicated. We're going to do a little bit of maths and some stuff like that to figure out some page per days, the page to page stuff like that. Okay, so this book,
we have the calculator at the ready.
Right. We have the technology. This is called Different Seasons by Stephen King, right? There are 4 short stories in here. We're going to be reading 2 of them. The 2 that we are reading have inspired the movies, The Shawshank Redemption and Stand By Me. So the first book is called Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, and the second book is called The Body, right? Okay.
And The Body is Stand By Me?
Stand By Me, yes.
Yeah, because they go
to find the body. Right. Okay. So Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. This one starts on page 15. And so what we're doing now is we're going to add up how long both these books are and then divide it by 30. And that's how we're going to get our page and pace, right?
I got an RPN calculator, so it's not a big deal.
There we go. So 15 to... Come on now. To 108. So...
123?
No, you have to subtract 15 from 108 because it starts on page 15 and goes to page 108.
108 minus 15?
Yep.
93.
Okay, so 93. And then we have... Okay, the body starts on 293. And it goes to 436.
143.
So 143
Plus 93.
plus 93.
Plus 236.
236. Okay.
Or what are we, 30?
30 days.
30 days? That's not even 8.
Less
Just shy
than
of 8.
Come on, guys. Page and pace, 8 pages a day for both these stories.
Let's
and I
fucking
will
go.
tell you,
We got this.
yeah, I'll tell you, I started Shawshank earlier this week and I'm on page 64. So it's really good. This particular version I have is very small. I bought another one. This is Shane's copy of it. Shout out Cleveland. But I bought one. It's driving me crazy to not write in this book. So I bought one this week. It was supposed to be at work today. I was going to stop by and get it. It wasn't there yet. So it's supposed to arrive on Monday. And then I will switch to my new version and I'm going to start annotating because it drives my wife crazy and I love it. I also love the idea of letting someone borrow one of my books and they can read the shit that I thought of it. They also might fucking hate that, right? I bet some people will absolutely hate that. I like the idea that someone is like, wow, it's really interesting to know what he thinks about this book because I think that what I think is interesting. So,
I'm on your side on this one. I think that's fantastic.
yeah. So I think that it would be cool. So yeah, all these books, 1984 and stuff like this, they're all, it's kind of dark and stuff, but they're annotated. There's notes in here. There's things in there. There's brackets. It's hard to see, but they're there. There's some things that are underlined, short passages underlined, longer ones in brackets. All these things are fantastic. Stephen King, you guys know who Stephen King is, right? Stephen King is kind of a crazy person. He's got 90 bajillion books. He's also a super crazy duper lefty now. So he got hit by a van one time and fucked up his hips and some of his back. And I found out that I really enjoy his stuff. I didn't really know that, but Shane is really into Stephen King, and so he's recommended a lot of his stuff to me. One of the books that I listened to recently, Dreamcatcher, which is a book that I saw as a youth in theaters with my family, and then
You did The Mist recently, too,
yeah,
right?
just recently did The Mist, yeah. And I've done other ones. The Long Walk is another one that I've read. I really enjoy these books. I really enjoy Stephen King books, not necessarily like the super scary ones, but I like the different kind of paranormal aspects and things like that. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Do you happen to know, because that is an anthology
Yes.
filled with multiple things. Do you know, have you seen any of these individual books on display just as standalone, like novellas or anything?
No, I looked
Okay.
for them and I don't know that. I'm certain that there are copies you can find, because I'm probably at the one time. He also did a ton of shit in magazines. So these could have been done in like long form magazines, and then taken from there and put into this book. So I don't know exactly how it came about. We probably could find out. If I was really good at this, I would have done that. But, this is a little delayed, a little bit backwards, a little bit of the way that we've done things. So, let's see. They're all published in different days or on different days, but they're all published in different years because they're over time. So I'm not going to go through and do the different publishing dates, but let's see. This particular one is from 1982, but some of these other ones are from, 67 and stuff like that because the guy's been writing for 9 million years. So,
And just a cursory Amazon search for like Stephen King, The Body,
yeah.
623 paperback just for The Body. So I'm
there
sure you
go.
can find
Yeah,
it.
so you can find it. And so I'm sure they were probably published in various ways. Like I said, the Shawshank is less than 100 pages. It's 85 pages. So that could have been released any number of different ways. But Animal Farm is like 120 pages, something like that. Some real short books that are out there like that. But those ones are great to carry around with you and to, crush in just a few hours if you're stuck somewhere. So,
Yep. And I also found Shawshank individually for $9.98
there you
paperback.
go. There you
So
go.
to each their own. Either way, you can get a hold of them.
Yeah, it's again, like I said, I bought this one different seasons because I'll end up reading the other two stories. I bought it, I think, for like $16 on Amazon earlier this week. So they're all right around that price range. We try and keep it around. As always, I don't say it every month, but if you guys need help, if you need a copy of it, let me know. It'll still be easy to read because it's 8 pages a day. So even if you only do it in half a month, that's still totally, it'll be a little bit quicker, but these books are good. They're easy. They're fantastic. And both of the movies are worth a watch. I think because of the way that Stephen King writes with such intense detail, they translate generally really well to movies. Their movies are almost never as good as the book. We all know that. But as far as adaptations go, I think the vast majority of the Stephen King movies I have seen have been relatively good. I've not seen all of them, but like Misery is really good with James Caan, that one, and Kathy Bates. That's a great movie. The Shining obviously is a fantastic movie that's like, hailed all over the place.
Yeah, we can skip that one.
The
I
Shining
rewatched it recently and meh.
It's at least a good movie. Whether it's as good as people say it is up for debate, but it's at the very least a good movie. Dreamcatcher, like I said, is one that I've really enjoyed. It is a good one. The made-for-TV ones, the newer ones are, whatever.
The Mist I recently watched.
Yeah,
was
The Mist was
fantastic.
great. Yeah.
Great movie.
So there are tons of them. Tons of absolutely fantastic Stephen King movie adaptations or book movie adaptations that I think are worth time. I'm sure we'll talk more about them when we do this review preview next month. I can't think off the top of my head what the May book is. I'm pretty sure that it has to do with government. Pretty sure that we're switching back a little bit heavier, but this is already good. This is the second fiction book that we've had this year, which I think is great. We have another one coming in October. So we got a lot of good things going on here.
Yeah, I like that your fiction window is opening a lot more.
Really enjoyed them. Yeah, I've begun to really, really enjoy these fiction books. So
Remember, World War Z opened the window.
that's right. Open the window. So I think with that, we can bring this review preview to a close. I want to thank everybody again for joining me. Donovan from Salted Streets for the review preview of March and April. Colin is here as producer, obviously, producer extraordinaire. I love that. This has been great. It's been a little bit late, so thank you guys for sticking with us. We had the plague that, flowed through all the different houses and all the things, but we should be back on track. Next time we get together to do another episode, we are doing the following review preview for different seasons and then whatever the May book is. So stick around for that. We'll see you guys later. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Keep booking it up, everybody.
Welcome to the South of the